Revolution at freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
Welcome to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes to Cultivate Consciousness, where, for the next 2 hours, Bridgette Dolgoff and Kelsey Sweet will be sharing their knowledge and understanding with their own beautifully unique twists on all topics related to helping humanity to achieve betterment of health in body and in mind. Settle yourselves down on this fine Saturday evening. For now, it is time for Bridgette and Kelsey.
All right, everybody. Hey, how's everybody out there tonight? On Saturday, so East Coast, we're at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Kelsey and I are here on the West Coast, and that is 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Yep, and Kelsey's so funny because we're like doing different kinds of names instead of calling ourselves the Gruesome Twosome. That monster, the man behind the curtain, has to deal with us. She was coming up with different names, so I was kind of stuck there. But this is Carrying Stones and Digging Holes to Cultivate Consciousness, and your host Bridgette Dolgoff and Kelsey Sweet. You can find out everything you need to know about Kelsey Sweet on her website, kelseysweet.com. Also, if you want to know more about the show, I haven't listened to the show, you don't know us, you can go to my website, coe-llc.com, and I've got a page there for the show. Has everything that you need to know about me and Kelsey. So also information. Remember, we don't take hate mail, so please don't send it. All right, so Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. We're actually working on a new tagline where I think where radio never sleeps, or I forget what our tagline is now, but we're getting a new tagline. I think submissions are mid-June, and we're looking for a new tagline that goes along with Revolution Radio. And I submitted one, but I'm not going to tell anybody what it is. So there you go. Nah. So also everything that we do here at Revolution Radio, everybody volunteers all of our time. We have 90 hosts. We also have management, we have people running our servers and everything else, and most of us work other jobs to make money, because we don't make money at our show or doing our show. We do it to bring you the best information we can, and the best, education and stimulation and whatever else that you may find here on Revolution Radio. So go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and click on our donation area, and you can see what our monthly net is, and as it's getting chewed down. So lots of different ways that you can donate. I think we've got some kind of foreign currency drop box, because we know that, we do have hosts that are international from other countries. We also have the snail mail. You can do ATM card. We also have some Patreon stuff, so you can do that. And then also don't forget to go to our shop and get yourself, one of your favorite host mugs. So that's what I've got for you. All right. So anyway, today I have a special guest, and so somebody new that I've never had on any of my shows, and I'm going to let people know what his website is. It's Darrow, DARROW, hand, HAND.com. And he is a naturopathic doctor and does a lot of other things as well. And how I found out about Darrow is that he is one of the people that is helping doing a 2-year medical herbal fellowship with AARM, and he is one of the people, the mentors and people that help out and help lost, confused people like myself find out how to make my classes and get all my stuff done. So, hey, Darrow, are you there? Oh, and Darrow, he's in Hawaii.
My cell phone's in Hawaii. Yeah, I'm here. I'm in Massachusetts, though.
Oh, do you go back and forth, or you used to live in Hawaii and then move to Massachusetts, or?
Yeah, I used to live in Hawaii.
Do you miss it?
I do miss it, yeah. And I do go back pretty much every year, so it's nice.
That is nice. I mean, you have the cold place, Massachusetts, and the super warm place. Kind of ideal.
Yeah, it's ideal. It's a beautiful place. You should go.
Yeah, I went a long time ago when I was in high school with a whole bunch of friends, but I haven't been back since. I work too much.
Well, balance is good.
It is. So how long have you been in doing healing work or medicine? I mean, naturopathic medicine.
About 20 years. Yeah. So my dad had a bad back when I was a child, and he tried all these different practitioners, and he finally was told to go see John Sarno in New York City. And Sarno told him, he's a conventional medical doctor, he told him that your back pain's not being caused by an abnormality in your back. Your back's perfectly healthy. It's unconscious things that's causing your back pain. And so if you follow this protocol or whatever and accept this on a deeper level, the back pain will go away. And so he threw out his car cushion that was good for the back, and he started running again, which was bad for the back, and started doing these things as though his back was perfectly normal. And 3 months later, he had no more back pain. That was 30 years ago. So that was kind of the stepping stone that I took towards getting into naturopathic medicine.
That's a great stepping stone, actually. Targeting the consciousness first, right?
Yeah.
To healing. So you started getting involved with, so did you become a naturopathic doctor at first, or did you do more body work? Because I noticed, I was looking at your website, and you do craniosacral therapy, you do Bowen, you do, a lot of other things other than the naturopathic doctor credential.
Yeah. So I started studying as a naturopathic doctor in school, and as part of that, I was introduced to craniosacral therapy and Bowen technique. Bowen is a craniosacral and Bowen. They're both energy type of medicine that uses a hands-on healing. So craniosacral is on the concept that the bones of the skull still continue to move to some extent, and that there's like a hydraulic system between in the cerebral spinal fluid, and the rhythms of the body, so you can kind of feel that, and if it's off, you can fix things. And then Bowen technique, Tom Bowen just saw where to touch people to heal them, and then he trained a couple of practitioners, and those practitioners then brought it to the rest of the world, and I was fortunate to study with them at one point. So, yeah, and they're both really gentle techniques that usually, you'll have the patient be comfortable, lay on a massage table or whatever, and they don't need to remove their clothes. It's done through the clothes, and they find it to be very relaxing, and, pains will go away often. So, yeah, it's really beneficial therapy to do.
Yeah, I use a limb escape pattern, pulse pattern on people. So what do you think that you what do you think you use more in your practice?
Well, I use Bowen, and I kind of combine them. So I'll use it on every patient, or most every patient. If they come in for a visit for naturopathic medicine, I'll do that at the end so that they can sample it, or if they just come in for that. So, yeah.
And yeah, what are your thoughts on, people in general? Do you feel that, like the MD told your dad originally that most of the stuff, do you find that some of your patients that you can get them to change their mind and change their life, or do you find that you have to kind of like wean them off of their life, like get them on different kinds of vitamins and diet and get them into it like a new lifestyle pattern?
Yeah, well, all of that. One thing I also do, when I've taken some functional medicine classes and I work at a functional medicine clinic. And so our goal is to try to find the root cause of what's causing people their problems, why they're having their health concerns, try to see when it started and what may have been going on at that time. And oftentimes they don't know what was happening at that time. But interestingly, usually they'll mention, like for example, I had a patient come in, she had a 5-year-old child, and she initially brought the 5-year-old child to see me, and then she was like, "Oh, I should come see you too." So I'm like, "Okay." And then we got to talking, and she said, "Oh, well, all these symptoms happened 4 years ago." I'm like, "Okay, well, what happened 4 years ago?" And she's like, "Well, nothing, nothing here, nothing there, nothing there." And we get to talking about some other things, and I'm like, "Oh, well, so you have a 5-year-old?" And she's like, "Yeah." So, did you breastfeed him? Yeah. How long for? For a year. Okay. So that would have been 4 years ago that you stopped breastfeeding. Yeah. Do you want a second child? Yes. Does your husband? No. And so there was a lot of conflict there with her husband. So I was like, okay, well, that may have been a contributing cause to it. So that's something, through I counsel patients as well. And so oftentimes they're able to see things through that counseling. She decided, I talked to her about, having a baby, and she was really on board with it. And she said her husband really wasn't on board. But, the more she talked about her husband's interaction with her son, I thought that he wasn't really a no, that he was more, he had some concerns or fears or whatever, but that he'd probably be very happy with having a second child. And so I told her that I thought that he probably was likely on board if you, just ask him different things or whatever, or point things out in one way or another. And so I asked her if she was going to have another conversation, because they'd had a conversation about 6 months prior where he said that he was a definite no, and he was worried that she was going to leave him because he's a definite no. And so through talking to her for a while, I was like, okay, so when are you going to bring it up again? She's like, this weekend. I'm like, okay. And then she came back in, a month or so later and, didn't mention it at all. So towards the end of the meeting, I asked her about it. And she says, oh, he's on board. And I'm like, that's great. And she's like, yeah. And, I was late with my menses, so I thought I was going to be able to report to you that not only was he on board, that we're already pregnant. But she did have her menses, so she's still trying, but she's really happy about that. And I had another patient that had a similar, she told me that she was on the fence about having a baby. And so I said, okay, well, imagine yourself having a baby. How do you feel? Fantastic. Like, okay, that's pretty strong. Language is really important. There was no hesitation there whatsoever. She was really interested. She was really, there for having a baby. So I was like, okay, well, imagine yourself not having a baby. How do you feel? Long pause, and cloudy skies, Winnie the Pooh struck by lightning. I'm like, okay, well, that seems pretty clear that you want to have a baby. And so we talked about her fears around it or whatnot. And by the end of the visit, she's like, yeah, I'd like to have a baby. And so her due date was this past Monday. And so she's now, thinking that with the full moon on Tuesday, that her baby will likely come on Tuesday. So, yeah, those are a couple of stories.
Yeah, I love those kinds of stories. I really enjoyed when what was his name? Bernie Siegel. Bernie who was
Yeah.
writing Peace, Love, and Healing, and he'd have these really great stories in his book about imagery, pictures, and then making, deciding what his medical protocol was going to be with people based on the picture they brought back.
Huh.
I guess, that, you're like, okay, so we're considering chemotherapy treatments. So go home and draw yourself a picture and come back
Mm-hmm.
to the office. And he said, when they'd come back with these pictures where everything was black and it had poison and like death, he said he
Uh-huh.
realized like you can't give them chemo treatment because what's going to happen to them.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it goes back to that whole, perception, like what you perceive to be real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why, like, more so than not, like, one of the things I always tell people, clients of mine and stuff, is that medicine it should be an individualized thing because everybody's different. We
Mm-hmm.
could kind of lump people up into one category, but everybody's unique because all of their experiences are unique. Things that have happened to them make them unique.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes their structure. I tell people I have 8 vertebrae in my neck.
Oh, wow.
I also have, I had some extra teeth
Uh-huh.
as a kid. So, there isn't any general rule, and you have some people that have, recently I was looking at some data. I was upgrading my osteopathic credentials with this amazing, had to do it online, of course, because of COVID for a year. This amazing French doctor. And we were looking at a lot of the statistics of people in the last 40 years are developing new bones,
Mm.
some that didn't exist before,
Uh-huh.
and especially like around the knee area. And so you think about that, you think like, okay, well, 5% of the population have this little bone in their foot or their knee, maybe only 5% of the population have these little intricate things, maybe 1%, maybe 50%. And so everybody's different, everybody is different. And so their structures are different. And it's really important to kind of deal with people as an individual and kind of not like a cattle feedlot, one at a time with the same, protocol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, individualized medicine is a good thing because everybody's an individual. So,
Yeah, exactly. So, oh, hey, Kelsey. Oh, no, she's going back and forth. She has Axe tonight. So her son is 5. And he,
We've got London Bridges playing in the background.
so
mm.
periodically, sometimes we have Axe in the background during our
That's
shows. So
awesome. He's fine.
Oh, okay.
he's
on
like,
hosting training.
yeah, he has co-hosting training. He's 5.
That's nice.
So, but he sometimes steals the show, so we don't let him on all the time. So,
Mm.
with your life, so did you grow up in Hawaii and?
No. I grew up just north of New York City, and I went to school in Ohio, and then went to school in Toronto for the naturopathic medicine. And my sister got married in India while I was still a student at as a naturopathic student. So I flew to India to go to her wedding, and on the flight, I met someone that was doing a world round trip. And so I decided that when I graduated, I would do a world round trip too. And so then I graduated and had no money. So I was like, oh, well, maybe at some point. And then I met somebody else who was going to do a world round trip. And I was like, I'm going to do it too. And so then I just decided to borrow the money. So I'm really good with finance. So I borrowed $15,000 on my credit card and I put it into my bank account at 0% interest from the credit card company. And so they had a 6-month promotion for that. And then another company wanted to give me $15,000 for 6 months at 0%. So I just kind of bounced it back and forth between the credit cards, paying 0% interest, and just bought a ticket to go around the world. And so the cheapest way to go was to actually purchase the ticket in London. So I planned the trip ahead of time, and then I felt like a millionaire because I just walked into Heathrow Airport and I bought the ticket and got on the plane, and then I could. I'd already picked the destinations, but the date was always flexible, so I could always call up and change the date to another date. And so from London, I flew to through Munich down to Venice, and then from Florence through Germany up to Zurich, Switzerland, and from there to Japan, to China, and then down to Thailand. And the most comfortable transportation I was ever on was on the train from Shanghai to Hong Kong. It was a 25-hour train ride, and you basically have these sleeper beds. So there's like it's like 6 bunk beds, 3 facing 3, and you just put the middle bunk up during the day so you can sit on the lower bunk and you play cards and share food and that sort of thing. And the train's going through the countryside, so it's really pretty. And so when I got down and was visiting a relative in Hong Kong, they were like, "Oh, you must be exhausted." And I'm like, "No, not at all." So so it was really cold in Shanghai, and it was really warm in Hong Kong. It was cold in Beijing, and I got to see the Great Wall, and we went out to where it was kind of dilapidated, so you could really see, what went into it, not the touristy spots. And it was cold in Beijing, and I was there with, some Israelis and Australian kids and whatnot, and they'd never seen ice before, so they were excited about the ice. And then I went down to Thailand and learned to scuba dive and whatnot, and it was really warm. And so when I was in Thailand, I decided that I was going to move out of New England because I really liked the warm climates. So China was really cold in Shanghai and Beijing, but it was really warm in Hong Kong and Thailand. So I decided, yeah, I like warm climates. I'm going to move. And while I was in Thailand, I challenged my biggest fear. So in 7th grade, I wouldn't touch a rubber snake on the top of, in this gift shop or whatever. And so they actually had an opportunity. They said, "Do you want to hold the snake?" And I didn't say no. I just merely convulsed at the mere idea of it. And then I used my scuba training to calm my breathing. And then they put the python. The python wouldn't move a centimeter. So I always figured that he was a drugged python. And because I don't even know if they were holding the neck or not. I thought it was just, it was like asleep. And they asked beforehand if I wanted them to put the other snakes that actually move like a snake on my arm. And I was like, no. But then they did. And, I had curiosity about the snakes. And, I thought that previously that they'd be slimy or whatever, but they're really dry and they're muscular. And I saw all the vertebrae of a python. It was just, 10 feet of vertebrae. And that showed me that it was an animal, not a monster coming to get me. And then during the cobra show, the guy was crazy. He went nose to nose with 3 venomous cobras. And he actually put one of them in his mouth while holding up another one. And then he was bringing one cobra around for people to see. And since I was in the front row, I was able to touch the cobra. He, of course, was controlling its neck, but, it had a yellow body. So he showed me the venom. So that was pretty cool. And he terrorized some of the younger women there because he was digging through this big brown box and threw over his head something that looked like a snake. So they just screamed at the sight of it. And it was just a rope. And then he had another snake that I called the rambunctious teenager snake because it would kind of scoot out towards the audience. And he would grab it by the tail and pull it back. And it would scoot out towards the audience. He'd grab it by the tail. So everybody moved back a row. But I trusted that he had control of the snake. So I didn't move. I stayed in the front row. And then he asked for a volunteer to hold the real python that he had just wrestled with in the water. And since I tend to volunteer for things, I volunteered, and so he held the neck again and put it on my shoulders, and so I had rented a moped that day, and driving to the snake show, I was afraid that there'd be sticks on the road that were snakes, and I'd be afraid that they would bite me. And then leaving the snake show, I imagined that there is snakes, or that the sticks were snakes on the road, and that I was concerned that I might hurt them. So it was a pretty big transformation. And on that day, I lost my ATM card, and I tend to lose some type of identity with a big life change for me. And so that day it was my ATM card, and so I used up all my U.S. currency by the time I got to Hawaii. And so this guy, I just asked some random person where an ATM machine is when I land in Honolulu, and the guy says, "Where are you from?" And I say, "Oh, just north of New York City, Croton Harmon." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You know Josh Kimberly?" I'm like, "Yeah, we grew up together." So that was one calling for Hawaii. And then just before I left New Zealand, so from Thailand, I went to Singapore. I had some family friends in Singapore that I stayed with. And then I flew on down to Australia, and I loved being in Australia. I like saying good day, mate, and seeing the kangaroos and going to the beaches and whatnot. And then from Australia, I went to New Zealand, and from New Zealand, I went to Hawaii. And just before leaving New Zealand, I'd remembered that I had been organizing some naturopathic, thing to try and get some people, some other doctors on board with something. And this doctor in Hawaii I had spoken to, and she had said, "Oh, if you ever come to Hawaii, look me up. You can stay at my place." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I'd remember this just before I left New Zealand. So I called her up, and she's like, "Oh, no, I know, but you can stay with my good friend. She's also a naturopath." And so I called her up, and just before I got on the flight out of Auckland, she's like, "Yeah, sure, you could stay. It's perfect." So I was like, "Great." So then I went and stayed with her for a few days, and really hit it off with her husband. And he was like, "Oh yeah, you've definitely got to go to Big Island to see the volcano, and you got to go to Kauai." I'm like, "Okay." So I went to the Big Island, and I saw the volcano, and it was erupting at that time, so that there was lava that you could you could walk on the dried lava that was over the molten lava that was flowing, bright orange, that you could see it at night or whatever. So that was pretty cool. And then there was the Mele, the Monarch, the hula festival was also there that weekend. So I happened to get to see like international hula competition, that the creme de la creme, which is pretty cool. And then, so I really enjoyed being on the Big Island. And then went to Kauai, and you'll be hiking. So Kauai is really beautiful, and I hiked all the way to the Nepali coast, and stayed at the beach at the end of that. It's about 11 miles or so. And most people just go the first 2 miles. So on my way out, I was past the 2 mile mark, so I was almost out on the Nepali coast. And how you'll see people that remind you of someone that you know, but you don't usually say anything. So, this guy looked like somebody I knew, and I didn't stop hiking. I just walked past him, and I thought out loud, "Oh, you look like my friend Gordy Shear." And he said, "Darrow?" And I, hadn't seen him for 15 years or whatever. So that was another calling to be in Hawaii. And then I went back to Honolulu, and just really liked it there, and stayed. I initially was going to stay in Hawaii for a week, but I ended up staying a month. And a couple of days before I left, I decided that I was going to move there. And so I finished my trip, and then I picked up and moved there about 6 months later. And so I spent about 15 years there until I got married, and my wife wanted to move back east. So.
Well, great story. I love the stories about the snakes, because I'm the same way. When I was a kid, a whole bunch of other kids shoved me in a chest and threw rubber snakes on me and locked it. My mom had to find me in there. I was like totally traumatized.
Oh my God, how awful.
So my whole life I've been terrified of snakes, and they, before, I always, like you, I had this imagination. I love what Rudolf Steiner says, our imaginations about things, but
Uh-huh.
just didn't want to be around snakes at all. And I'm always coming into contact here in Reno with rattlers, always, like on the trails, hiking.
Yeah.
And they're always like pretty docile towards me, but I like totally, I'll freak out, like past the point of like what a normal person should freak out. And
Uh-huh.
I've gone and paid, different snake exhibits and places to go kind of get close to snakes. And it just really hasn't really worked out well because I'm so terrified. Then recently, where I'm staying right now, it's like a, you know, younger development. There's big kind of swamp area in the back of this housing, development where people can walk around. And so the house that I'm staying in has a snake den.
Oh,
When the yard in the back is really small, and it's maybe 30 steps to the fence. And so when the snakes started waking up, they're all racer snakes with like yellow stripes down them. But there was probably at least 60 or 70 that came out during different periods of time for about 3 weeks. And the only reason I knew that the snakes were over there is one of them, the larger one, there's a low water bird bath, with water in it, and they were so dehydrated, when they came out.
yeah.
And he was trying to, get into the bird water, get a drink and hang out.
Yeah.
So I totally freaked out. And then I went to the fence and I saw, the first week I saw, like 3-footers, one wrapped up on the rocks on the other side of the fence because the fence is see-through. And then what they'd do is they'd come up, they'd sun, right? They'd get ready, and then they'd go down the rock wall over into the swamp. And then the medium-sized ones all came up, and then they sunned. They were there 3 or 4 days. Then they went, across the thing, and then the smaller ones. And then recently, one of the cats got one of them and dragged one in. So it's interesting. And I do a lot of snake medicine type work, and I also grew up having to deal with Pentecost. So my grandmother was a prophet and an exorcist in the Pentecost church. So that there's another snake handling kind of event. So yeah, so I understand what it's like to actually start to have compassion for the snakes versus, like somebody should set a bomb off and get rid of them all. So yeah. Yeah, so snake, yeah, it's interesting. But I have friends of mine that are so terrified of spiders. I mean, way worse probably than I've been of snakes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, get that.
My sister grew up with boa constrictors, or I grew up with my sister having two. She had a 10-footer and a 12-footer.
Mm.
And then when I was really small, we found a tarantula kind of out in the wild and brought it home. Snakes and spiders I do okay with. Probably the rare few, but the rattlesnakes, though, those things, that'll get me. Especially when you see like skins that are 6 to 8 feet long.
So I also like your analogy of that whenever you go through a really big process, you lose part of your identity. Has that happened before?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the most vivid one of that I remember, but it happened pretty often. I'd lose my wallet, or I'd lose an ID card or something like that, and something would have happened that day or sometime near there. So yeah, I definitely believe that. Hasn't happened recently though.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking about this the other day. So I had this imagination, And I'm kind of moving into like a section of my life where I'm going to have to like jump off the cliff, no holds bar, and just trust that everything's going to be okay. And so I talk to the voices in my head, I think, like a lot of people do. And my voices talk back. I can ask them questions, So anyway, I was laughing because one of them said, okay, well, this time around, you've just got to go for it. You've just got to bite the bullet, jump off the cliff, and just trust, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. Other than this. And then they showed me this image of me holding on to every possible thing with my fingernails as, they're pushing me along, trying to get me to the cliff edge. They're like, this is you in the past, but this is where we need you to be here now in the future. And so I said, okay, well, I'll work on it. All right. I'm going to get prepared to jump off the cliff. Right. So I'm not like holding on to all of the foliage and everything as you're trying to push me towards the edge of the cliff.
Do you have somebody that you're working with that can help you towards that?
Yeah, the voices in my head.
You might want to get a voice outside your head that's also beneficial and supportive. What do you think of that?
Yes, no, I have lots of voices outside of me too that are very helpful and extremely beneficial.
Okay, but I mean one specifically towards helping you to go towards that cliff and jump.
Well, next week is when I take the jump, so we're there.
We're there. All right.
We're there. Yeah, and I'm just trying to look at it as an adventure, right? So it's an adventure. So basically what I'm doing is I'm moving into my car and I'm going to be going on a 3-month trip to different areas, mostly to scout out a place to, in the future, buy land in Wyoming to build a humanitarian project to rehabilitate combat vets into new farmers. So I'll have 2-year apprentices and teach them biodynamic farming and herbs and how to grow plants and restore soil and whatever we're doing, I'll be teaching.
Great.
So now I'm at the point that I want it all to start coming together because I've been working on it for 20 years. So I've gotten enough of the pieces together. So now I've just got to go target. So I have a little bit of, anxiety because I have been homeless in the past. And so, but I have to, not allow my mind to equivalentize this to something that's happened to me in my past. So that's where I'm at.
Whatever happened in the past, I mean, you're not homeless now, so whatever happened worked out in one way or another.
Yeah, well, I'm still alive, so and I'm thriving.
So you'll be alive and thriving after you jump as well, then.
I'm probably more alive and more thriving.
Well, there you go. That's inspiring.
Yeah, well, I'm a freedom-oriented person, so I have I have a stellium in Sagittarius, and in the 3rd house. So everything about communicating and traveling is all that I'm about. So, yeah. You sound kind of like you might have some Sagittarius in there too with all your traveling.
Yeah, I'm not sure. People have done my chart before, but I forget if I have Sagittarius. But I'm an Aries, so similar fire sign, I guess.
Yeah, a similar move it ahead sign. Don't stand in the same place very long.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I always like the alchemy of, I took this class and the person was talking about, using, it was a anthroposophy type of astrology makeup. I mean, in Rudolf Steiner's work, we use lots of different calendars for different kinds of planting and growing to make sure that the plants have, exactly what they need at the time that they're going to need them. And so there's a lot of, I guess, of that kind of work that goes on, in a lot of the Steiner's work. So the class was basically on, like the 4 types: air, water, fire, and earth. And they were talking about how, a lot of that earth stuff, those people are living in a very, solid, it's a very solid reality, and everything comes back to the solid reality. And then the water is next, and it's kind of, it goes through, can cover over, and it kind of dominates, whatever it touches, but it also can like recede, like emotional stuff. And they talked about how that was necessary to like feel things out, right? To explore and feel things out. And then that the next level was air, and air was like super expansive because number one, you can't see it, but yet it inundates, covers, is inside and outside of everything. And this is kind of like, our mental layers going out into the world and interacting with everything. And then the interesting part to me was the alchemical part where they talked about fire, and that fire is what transmutes. So fire has kind of a big job. It has to transmute, mostly solid matter so that it can, burn up the old and then actually pull down from, the ethers, from the universe, or whatever you view that as, the cosmos, information in. And then we also have to secure it into a solid matter. And then that starts the whole process again. So now you've got earth dealing with it in a solid form, water moving around it, checking it out, air consuming it and moving through it, and then back down to the fire process where the old is consumed, and then it reaches up, pulls something new in, and then has to be chained back into the solid matter.
Interesting.
Yeah. So us fire people are burning stuff up, redeveloping it, and then trying to figure out how to shove it through the circle hole, the square through circle hole into solid matter.
What I think is neat about the healing practice aspect of it and the traveling is you're able to integrate many different viewpoints and many different lenses, many different perspectives into something perhaps new or unique. So I think in trying to connect to the person you're trying to heal, right? Each individual has a certain way that medicine should revolve around them, but it seems like the practitioners as well have their own ways and their own approaches. And I think it's fascinating of how it's developed and where people get those skills and how they get those skills, and how in allowing just kind of like the synchronistic aspects to take control of it, or to just allow the trust to go into the work. I think there's something to it because there's an openness to exploring, I think, something beyond, and I think that goes into the alchemy of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we the whole way that ARM got started. So when I landed in San Francisco from Hawaii, Mikhail Friedman picked me up at the airport. He was like, "Oh, do you want to organize a conference in Hawaii?" Because I told him that I was planning to move there, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." And so he had invited Dennis Wilson to give a guest lecture for his endocrinology class, because he had come across Dennis Wilson using a different approach for treating thyroid patients. And Dennis's approach was basically, he found that most patients just take T4, and they don't, they're told basically that they have to take, Synthroid or whatever for the rest of their life. And once you're low thyroid, you're always low thyroid. And he, Dennis Wilson is he's kind of an entrepreneur, and he's very innovative. And so he came up with the concept of using sustained release. So he had sustained release T3. So he had given his secretary some T3, and initially they would just like take small bites of a Cytomel. So basically getting the dose throughout the day, and that's kind of what got him to start thinking about asking a pharmacy to make sustained release T3. And so he asked them to do that, and then he developed a theory on that T3 we learn in medical school is the active hormone, and T4 is, we learned that it was also active, but now we recognize that it's really just a precursor to T3. And so if people have an issue converting from T4 to T3, if they're just taking more T4, they're not gonna address the issue because they're not able to make the conversion. And Dr. Wilson would talk about the different routes and the physiology of it, and that you might be making reverse T3 or something like that. And so he came up with the concept of cycling with T3. So you start off at a low dose and you cycle up to a high dose and cycle down, and you're able to get people to, in some cases, come off of the medicine completely so that they don't need to take any thyroid, and their body temperature comes up to normal, and their symptoms resolve. So Dr. Friedman and Wilson, they thought, well, let's have a conference. So we organized the conference out in Hawaii, and that's where we started training doctors on using the protocol. And so that's how ARM, the Association for the Advancement of Restorative Medicine, that's how we got started. And since then, it's branched out, and we have more training and herbal fellowships, and we have a spring conference, and we always have the annual conference. And we used to, of course, have it all in person till COVID happened, and we would try to have it at restorative locations. So we had it in Sedona a couple of times, and we had it in Moab, and all these traditional places to have a medical conference. And so we've trained over 1,000 doctors now on using the sustained release T3 and helping people to get better. And then Dr. Wilson, who hadn't really been exposed to natural medicine at all, he was curious about what Mikhail Friedman was doing with his patients and using these herbs and stuff like that. And so he asked him, well, what do I do about a patient with this or with that? And so he tried out some herbs for, based on what Dr. Friedman recommended, and they got better. So he had never thought that, plants could heal patients. And so that kind of exposed him to that. And so that's kind of how they came together to work together to form the conference. And they also worked together to form the Restorative Formulations product line. And something that I've been involved with helping to run since we started back after I've traveled around the world.
Yeah, I really like the lectures. I mean, only a few months in, but love. I have to tell you that I am totally in love with Mary Bove. Like I am, I wish she was my grandmother. And I wish, I knew where she lives so I could buy a house right next door to her, because she's
sweet.
one of those people that you just want to get more of her on you,
Yeah.
because she's so unbelievably intelligent, but she also has this probably from being, doing herbal medicine with pediatrics all those years, she just has like this feeling like of safety and security, like you could just crawl up in her lap and everything was just going to be just fine. That's how I feel about her. So I really dig her a lot. But yeah, you guys have some amazing people in your herbal fellowship and your the lectures and classes and all that. And it was pretty intense. the spring conference was pretty intense. There was just a lot of subject matter covered.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty intense couple days. And you talk about losing your ID after shifting. I was surprised that I gleaned as much off of it as I did. I mean, really did glean, a huge amount off of it. I'm just a little bit different. Would rather make my medicines, that I give to my clients. And so I
Yeah.
have kind of a different relationship with nature. Like today, before I got online, I was out looking at my yarrow area that grows along the river, my little secret area. And the other thing too is I really decided, like, I used to make bitters, but for some reason I haven't made any for a long time. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to make a whole bunch of it and give it away. So I'm going to do a yarrow flower, teasel leaf, and I may put some fake Solomon in it. It just depends. But yarrow is going to be the base, and teasel leaf, because teasel leaf you can eat, right? It's edible, but the root cures Lyme disease.
Oh, cool.
So the leaves are super bitter, some of the most bitter things I've ever eaten. Yeah, and they also have spikes on the back of the leaves. So they have this I call it like an armament. So, when I look at the signature of the plant, it's very protective. It can help people to build protection for themselves, right? In a very, like a energetic or spiritual kind of way, using the plant.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it in apple cider vinegar.
Nice.
Yeah, that'll be the base, and then we'll be able to give it out. So I was pretty excited. It kind of rejuvenated me. Her talk on it kind of rejuvenated like something that I used to do. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I've got to get out and see what plants are available for that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we try to make the conferences and the lectures relevant so that people can go out and start utilizing some of the things they learned from the conference right away in the first week or whatever. So I'm glad to hear that you got some practical purpose from it. And then, you mentioned the signature of the plant. Have you shared about Doctrine of Signatures, where basically there's a theory in herbal medicine and medicine that the Doctrine of Signatures is where you can look at a plant and it has certain characteristics, and those characteristics will give you an idea of what the plant can be useful for. So like you said, it has protective qualities, or it looks like a protective plant, so then it's going to have a protective effect on people. Or you might see that it looks really lifelike, and so it may have a lot of vitality in what it is useful for.
Yeah, and this particular plant, the teasel plant, several years ago I took an outdoor herbal medicine class where we went through the Sierra Nevadas and did campouts, and then we would harvest medicine, and then we would do long walks of what all the different plants were, and then we would have set curriculum where we would actually have to make medicine on the spot, and go home and make medicines from different things and bring it in and then get tested on that. And so, that whole signature thing started coming around really rapidly. But this teasel plant's so amazing because it has this head on it, this cone head. They used to use it for brushes and stuff like that, but it gets these little purple flowers on it. And when you have a bunch of these little plants together, the things that love these little purple flower heads are bumblebees. And I've never seen so many bumblebees that will be getting along, dive bombing this cone head, just trying to touch it on top of the armored leaves and then the root. So it's, you can tell when the bumbles get that so excited about it, you can tell that it's a very important, almost sacred medicine of sorts. You just have to figure out how to use it. But yeah, the whole signature thing about, I did a walk through this climax forest with a native man who does cultural restoration. And he talked about finding the signatures through smell. So we worked a lot on being able to walk into an area with your eyes closed and being able to smell all of the different plants that were in there and knowing who they are as soon as you like walk out onto the path. He said, because this is how their people do it. I mean, some of it's visual, but a lot of it is smelling, walking into the environment and smelling what the environment is offering at different parts of the year. So yeah, so I look at the signature thing kind of as could be a smell, could be a visual thing, could be a textural thing, could be a taste thing, you know, could be, that's how I found out, I think, that I looked into if teasel leaves were edible or not, because I was working with the root making tinctures for Lyme disease. And it said that the leaves were edible. So I, you know, ate one and it was so bitter. I was like, I couldn't swallow it. It was like, oh, hey, we're on break. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Mute out. freedomslips.com. And you are listening to the second hour of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes to Cultivate Consciousness. And your hosts are Kelsey Sweet and Bridgette Dolgoff. And you can find everything that you would like to know about Kelsey Sweet at kelseysweet.com. And then also, if you want to find out about our show, some information about our show, I've got a page on my website. Also have all kinds of interesting blogs on a lot of the information that's coming out about vaccines. And yes, everybody knows I'm the anti-vaxxer. All right. So anyway, I've got some interesting blogs from doctors from all over the world, all kinds of different information on my website, coe-llc.com. And you can find out about our show and our bios and all that jive. And also, while you're out looking around, you might want to stop by Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and check out where we're at with our donations. And so everything we do is voluntary. Our management doesn't even get paid. They work separate jobs. But so we just ask, just donate, help us stay on. Don't need a whole lot. So check in there and see what we need for donations. You can click on the donation button, drops down a menu, and we have so many different ways now that you can actually support us. And we are thriving at Revolution Radio. I mean, there was a time, a couple of years ago now, maybe, when our founder and operator, Nighthawk, passed away. And you can hear him a lot of in the promos. And he was the one that developed Revolution Radio and carried it through with his blood, sweat, and tears. And here we are, we're 90 hosts strong, and we have an amazing management. Our management rocks. And we're like, we're like a family. Sometimes we get along and sometimes we don't get along, but the number one thing that we believe in is the power of truth and the power of somebody to be able to express themselves and also share, educate, and bring information to the public. So that's the one, even though we sometimes fight like bad siblings, the one thing we stand on is that First Amendment and non-corporatization of our network. So thank you so much. And thank you for supporting us. We really, really appreciate that. All right. So we're in the second hour with our guest, Dr. Darrow Hand, and you can find him at DRDARROWHAND.com if you want to look up and see what he's doing and his offerings and all that jive while we're talking to him. All right, Mr. Darrow, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. What do you look for? Do you do herbal medicine? Do you actually go out into the field and look for plants, or do you make any medicines, or do you just, I mean, I know that at ARM you guys have lots of amazing formulas.
Yeah, I don't go out and pick things very often. I remember being out west and looking at the cactus flower, and that's something that's really good for diabetes. But yeah, I don't usually go out in the wild to pick my own things, but there are a lot of herbalists that do that. I'm just not one of them. So
yeah, well, the one thing I've been really getting from taking the classes that you guys have for the 2-year fellowship, it's kind of really helping me to being an osteopath, having spent a lot of time where I'm in clinic a lot, seeing 6-7 people a day, sometimes 6 days a week. This was before my brain cancer. I don't see that many people like that anymore. But listening to how everybody's has like a very unique background, the people that are teaching the lectures, the people that are involved, where they're coming from, how they run things, how they did run things, maybe how they've changed how they run things, how they run their life, what kind of things they rely on for their own life. And it's kind of really setting the pace for me, because I've realized that I'm probably a first contact kind of person with plant medicine, which means that, I want to have, I want to save medicinal plants. I mean, there's a lot of them dying. A friend of mine who's a traditional healer in Uganda, he, a few years ago, we used to have a lot of conversations. He has an interpreter. He's one of the first traditional healers to be asked to come to the conference, the Orthos conference in Germany, the medical conference. But one of the things he said was that so many of the plant medicines are dying, that they're being killed off and destroyed, by people that don't really understand that it takes hundreds and sometimes thousands of years to create the perfect storm where you have a lot of these plants growing. And so over the last 20 years, building projects of where wanted to grow things biodynamically and restore the soil, but also wanted to be able to grow them in a very natural setting in nature, and then also kind of on the farm, but also wanting people to send me seeds, because I know I have some friends that grow for native seed banks in the native indigenous culture, because some of their seeds, which are older than heirloom, some of these plants are 7,000 years old, and they have, the way that the native people talk about them is that the seeds are like chips, computer chips. And some of the seeds actually have barcodes on them. Some tribes actually would tattoo this barcode of their corn seed onto their chin when they would go out and talk to other people. So other tribal members could decide whether they wanted to arrange marriages into certain families, because of the way that the seed was. And so over, time, we've destroyed a lot of this energetic medicine, right? And memory, and coding. And that's why, probably we have a lot of problems with our own DNA structures and RNA structures these days. But wanting to be able to have, one of my friends who's come on my show, he started in the 70s as a horticulturist, and a native man named White Eagle didn't have anybody to pass these seeds down to, and trained my friend, who was white, into the native ways with the ceremonies, and so that the seeds would take to him, because they're like people, they're treated like people. And he would do huge outgrows of seeds till about right before COVID, and he had to retire to go do some other things, but he could take like 5 or 6 seeds, native seeds, that's all that there was left, and actually turn them into outgrows, and then be able to give them back to the people, and then fill other indigenous seed banks. So I would love to be able to take plant seeds in the future when I have land, so that I can actually repopulate medicines back into the world, for people and for everybody. So I think I've developed, that's my term, first contact. So I think, I think like, would I like to have a little bit of a clinic, that's in town away from my farm, so I can still, help people? Of course, it's probably something I'm always going to do. But I think for me, it's the first contact. It's making sure the soil and the environment's right, putting those seeds in there and talking to them and giving them what they need and promising them, a better future, and getting them to grow and learn how to use their medicines, and then collecting their seeds and then being able to send them out to other people and saying, this is what the plant needs, this is who the plant is, this is what the plant has to offer. As a first contact, and then being able to help people to understand them a little bit better.
Nice.
Yeah. I think, life's just a really long journey, to figure out what you're passionate about. And I'm just so passionate about seeds and plants and soil. I'm like a total crazy person when it comes to it, but
wonderful.
It's just, being able to take a leaf off a plant and taste where it's at. Is it happy? Is it sad? That kind of a situation. But
how do you know if a plant is happy or sad?
Well, usually I can tell by if I've had relationships with these kinds of plants before, I can tell by the smell, by breaking it apart. I can also tell by sometimes the texture. I can tell by how the plants are standing. And sometimes I can tell by, if they seed or they don't seed, so at different periods. And there has been, like, last summer, some of the sagebrush in the area, because I do collect sagebrush and I make infused oils from them for skin salves. It's a very Paiute kind of a medicine, along with cottonwood bud kind of salve medicines. And, going out and picking and harvesting the sagebrush for it. And as I'm picking it, and they start to, like, talk to me, like, we're concerned. And I'm like, what? You're concerned? Sagebrush is never concerned. What are you concerned about? Sagebrush is usually never concerned about anything. It can grow in any kind of environment. And them saying, well, we're concerned about the dirt, and we're concerned about there's no water in this area, and we're concerned about, what's going on around us. And so last summer it was kind of, when sagebrush puts you on alert that it's stressed out, that's kind of a big warning. So things like that, it just depends. Sometimes they'll directly talk to me, and sometimes they won't. It just depends. And it just depends on if I need them, if I need something to happen, or like, for example, this is kind of a crazy story, but this is the kind of stuff that I get from plants and seeds. So I'm trying to figure out, ultimately, my dog got a basically like a kidney type of infection from a vaccine, right, at the vet's office, and also kind of a problem with the lymph. And then she started to actually get some soft cell tumors, growing underneath, the skin. And so I'm trying to treat the urinary tract situation. And, I don't use even animal antibiotics on her, because I rescued her from a meth house, right? So she was a puppy living in a meth house where they were making meth, and I was building an urban farm project across the street. And so when she was 5 months old, I finally went over and rescued her. But she was addicted to drugs for 2 months, would have major withdrawals in the evening. I gave her a raw food diet, but she always had, autoimmune system stuff going on, right? Always had really high nervousness, always had, like, a lot of really, serious emotional stress, and all these factors. So I don't treat her with any type of antibiotics, because they give her more autoimmune system responses. Sometimes rashes, she's had welts. So I really rely on herbal medicine. And so, I went through all of my bags of tricks of stuff that I would use. I even tried manzanita, which is usually, like kick booty on any kind of urinary kind of stuff. So I ended up going on this crazy trip to look at this job about helping to build a food production in Washington State. And then at the trip was crazy. The people were crazy. And, I had decided that I wasn't going to stay there. But one of the things we did before I left was we went and collected usnea, which is, it reminds me kind of lichen, hanging lichen off trees. And so I learned what usnea, there's the fake one that grows alongside of it and what the usnea was. And so I collected it because here in Nevada, I don't have access to anything like that, because she said it's a major antibiotic. So I was like, well, yeah, let me get a jar, cram some of that in there, and pack it in, and then fill it with, some vodka, and then take it home. And then when I came home, I found out it's like this major urinary tract, thing, on top of being this amazing antibiotic, like one of the top natural antibiotics in the world. And so I realized, that part of me having to go on that crazy trip was so that the plant could get to me to help my dog.
Nice.
Yeah. So sometimes the most negative, crazy things are part of the journey of reaching the plants, because the plants have to reach you in some way.
Well, you have a very interesting and positive relationship to plants, it seems.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If there were no plants, I don't think I would like it here very much.
Yeah.
I think, everybody has something in this world that when they touch, smell, and feel, they just go, oh, makes this world worth it. Like, some people, my friend Lori loves the ocean. So she dropped everything and moved to the Cayman Islands to take a really crappy hotel job just to be on the beach, in the ocean every day.
How's she doing now?
Well, she's back in, British Columbia. And she's doing the best there. She was, born and raised there, but she wants to go back. She's like realized, like, that's her thing, is that she wants to go back to living in an ocean. So she's doing these visualizations of that has like this island life, and there's, boats, and she has crab cages, and she goes out every morning and she drops her crab cages and then floats around in the boat, maybe smokes some ganja, and and then goes back out and gets her crab traps, and then makes dinner for everybody, like it's crab every night kind of a thing. So she's got this, imagination that she's working with to see what, might happen.
Great. Well, it sounds like she's creating the process of being there again.
Yeah. And just, living this really great, life with nature. I think that's the really positive, because there are all these eco resorts now. I'm like, you could get a job. You're so brilliant. I mean, you could get a job like running one of these places, or helping to manage it, or who knows? But I mean, if you're willing to go.
So what do you think's holding her back right now?
Her kids. I mean, her daughter has got one more year through high school, and she loved the Cayman Islands a lot, even though she was working, a job that was way under her, educated pay grade, but she loved her life. And she was gone for 4 years, and she just really missed her kids. And she went back to BC, and now she kind of got herself stuck there. So now she's trying to pry herself loose like a barnacle on the bottom of the boat, and get herself back out there, on the market.
Yeah. Well, she'll get there. Sounds like she wants to be there, and she'll find the way.
Well, and I think, like the great part about, I'm 52 now. She's the same age as me. We've been friends for a long time. And I said, the great part about being 50 is that you just don't have to play by the other rules, anymore. Like, you didn't really have to anyway, but when you get 50, you're kind of like, okay, I'm a half a century old. I'm going to do what I want to do.
That's good. People should do that younger.
They should do it younger. Exactly. They should totally do it younger. But if we older can't figure it out, then we can't teach the younger to do it, right?
Well, we can be a role model, and we can let them do what they need to do to be inspired to follow their own path. I think the more we follow our own path, the better we're doing.
I think so too.
When we start young, we piss more people off, so we wait until we're older. The pressures of angering people for not meeting their expectations, right?
Yeah, well,
The old agenda.
I say, I talk with patients about expectations a lot, because people will get disappointed by expectations. So, like, one example is a patient came in and said that she was really upset because her husband, forgot her birthday. And I told her about that expectations are, you have this expectation that someone will be strong in their weak area. So if they were strong in their weak area, then it wouldn't be a weak area. So you cannot have a strength in your weak area, because that's your weak area. And so, having this expectation that someone's going to be strong there is just setting you up for disappointment. And that I also talk to patients about, there's what happens, and then there's the meaning that we make of what happens. And so what happened is that he had forgotten her birthday. And so the meaning that she ascribed to that was that, he didn't love her, or something along those lines. And his meaning was more that, he just isn't good with birthdays. So it wasn't, anything towards what her meaning was. And so, I'll tell patients that, whatever happens, happens, but we can create positive meanings out of that. And so, oftentimes people will feel, hurt or take a negative meaning from it when, like maybe somebody's mother wasn't there for them for some reason, or wasn't, said something that wasn't, received well. And I tell them, generally speaking, if it's a relative that's telling you something, like your mom or your dad, regardless of what's said, the background is that they love you. And so everything that they're trying to do for you is out of love. And so if you recognize that it's out of love, then looking back at what happened, can you put a framework of love around that and see something positive out of that? And so oftentimes patients will be like, yeah, I do recognize that my mom loves me. And so they start to look at these things from the past in a different light to see, oh yeah, so that's a really positive way of looking at it. And so then they can move forward instead of being stuck by it. So those are just some comments about that.
I think it's a good comment, like the meaning. I always tell people the story. Don't make a story up. Don't create your future when you don't know exactly what it is, creating the storyline out of something when you don't have the facts and you're making assumptions, because then you can create something else too that maybe you don't really want. It's better to just kind of figure it out, like you said, trying to change the framework into something a lot more positive.
Exactly.
Negative.
And you can always create something positive. Might as well. So create something that's supportive to you, what you want to be or where you want to go.
Exactly. Yeah, and the thing is, I think a lot of it is, one of the things I've been really working with lately is feeling and smell. And the kind of place that I want to live, and the smell and what it looks like and what the feeling is. A lot of people get kind of caught up, and I think I did for a long time, about where I wanted to put this project that I'm working on for this urban farm. I mean, this full-scale biodynamic farm with the veterans. I got kind of too caught up in the details, and not enough in the feeling. Like, how do I want it to feel? You know, what's it smell like? And then kind of going, like Wyoming also kind of has like a high desert like Nevada. So I can smell my way there, because when it rains in the desert, it has the most incredible smell that you've ever smelt in your entire life. So I can smell my way there.
How would you describe that smell? What smells come to mind?
Well, there isn't a smell that's actually like it, but it smells like something that's really thirsty and dry and parched. And then, like the rain comes and it fills it. It fills it up. That's like the smell.
And what does it feel like?
It feels like at the long end of a journey, a long, tough journey, the desert being a long, tough journey and being dry, that there's this restoration, and the empty becomes full, and you're content. Yeah, the rain really smells like contentment. It's been raining the last couple of days, and we don't really get a lot of rain here. So it's just, the smell is just incredible. I had to go walk on my nature path and go check on my plants to see what they were doing during it.
Cool.
What are you guys doing out here?
Uh-huh.
And I have a big tree that's the grandmother out there. She's a very, very old pine tree. So old. I think she's probably at least 1,500 years old. But the reason that they didn't clear cut her in this area, all of the trees that were on the mountains were clear cut, all the huge trees, because they, had to mine up at Virginia City. So yeah, they clear cut like all of the mountains, and so they're pretty bald. And but she's still standing because she's like Medusa, so she didn't have like one top. She has 4 tops that kind of grew together, and so they never cut her down because their equipment couldn't handle something like that. And so she's still there, and she's birthed out all of the other trees there, so you can tell which ones are her daughters and which ones are her granddaughters. And so I had to go visit her today, and she was like, "Oh, I missed you this winter," because I come during the summer to collect herbs. So I had to go touch her and put my arms around her and just tell her, I'm here. And it's always the thing that I do when I go out there to that particular area to look at the plants or collect, is I always talk to her first, because she's the gateway. She's the watcher of all of it. She takes care of it all and helps it.
Has she ever shared with you what her experience was with the clear cutting of all the other trees, and she was the only one left behind?
No, but there's a cedar tree that's on the south side of Lake Tahoe out towards Markleyville that I was going out there a lot. It's like a cedar forest, but they're all young cedar forests, and a lot of them have grown up out of big rounds where there would have been big cedars. And one day I was coming across, and I came across her, and I was like, wow, this tree could be like 500 or 800 years old. I mean, it's huge. And there was part of her that was burned out, on part of her middle, but just thriving. And it was during the drought when I found her. And I remember she was talking to me about how she had been asleep for a long time. Like she said, it's not unusual that trees like my size will go to sleep for 100 years. And then we wake up. And she wanted to know what was going on with everything. Like, she really didn't really understand. The big thing that really bothered her were these chemtrails, these things in the air and the atmosphere. She just really was really disturbed about it. And the river, this like small little thin creek bed that used to run year round was no longer running year round. It was a drought summer. So she asked me to go and collect some rocks for her that would have been underwater in this creek bed, to bring them back and put them inside of her so she could talk to them, so she could glean out like data and information from them. And then she would ask me to bring her certain things, and I brought her some crystals and all kinds of different stuff. And I would go and visit her all the time. And it's interesting because she talked to me about the 2 fires that came through there, the clear cutting, because she was left because she had 2 tops. And so that's how I learned about why some of these huge trees, very rarely were saved. And it was because she explained to me why she was left. But then, all of the other trees are so much younger. And she talked to me about 2 of the fires that came through. One when she was like around 300 years old or something like that, that started to kind of burn a little bit of a hole in her, and then another one that came by again, but she said she was much bigger during that one. Bit better, but very interesting. About then I started to realize that she needed to collect a lot of this information and data because she needed to communicate with other larger trees on the planet that may have been sleeping for a long time. And so I started to kind of realize that this is how they would have communicated, and it's interesting too, because Rudolf Steiner talks a lot about in his work, he was murdered by the Dark Brotherhood, in 1924. But one of the things he talked about was that how, trees especially, and plants, have a sterility. They have astral type energy that hangs over the top, and how important it is for the birds or insects to move this stuff around. And we see them pollinating, but they're also dragging this energy from one place to another, which is also, we could say, it's communication. It's data, it's information from one place to another. These birds go 3,000 miles and they still have information and data that's connected to them from their past environment. And we know that from, herd animals that, cross large areas, that they're picking up data and information through the plants and the water as they go, and then they poop out that information into a different form onto the land so that the land can gobble it up. So so I think there's a lot more communication going on than we know. And there are quite a few of these old trees. There's another huge one that's about 2,500 years old in the Redwood Coast down in Bodega Bay. I went down on a trip down the coast in, I don't remember what year it was, but I ended up having lunch with this guy, breakfast at this table out in front of this place, after sleeping on the beach in my car, and as I was heading down to San Diego to see some friends. And he was an arborer, and he asked me if I could, we were talking about some stuff, and I do a lot of I come from, family laws and things like that. So I'm always going out in nature, trying to help nature. So he asked me if I would come with him. And, I think about things that I do in the past, and I'm thinking, you don't even know these people. And you're like going out in the middle of nowhere. But he took me into this redwood forest, and the same thing was there. There was this one really old tree, like 2,500 years old, and it had 3 tops on it. And so they never cut it, but they cut everything else around it, and all the trees were smaller. So I smudged it and did some prayer work, and I had some really great, amazing crystals that had really healing energy. And so I popped them into the bark around the base, but the tree was so huge. I couldn't even see the top. It was so big.
Wow.
So I have this thing where, these trees find me, and I try to communicate with them the best that I can. And it's hard to talk to them about that. People don't understand the ways that they need people to be now. You know, before they had open communication with Indigenous people, and they communicated with them, and the Indigenous people communicated back, and we just don't have that now. People don't know how to do that now. And it's frustrating for them when they wake up after they've been asleep took a big nap for 500 years and wake up and expect
being
things to
asleep
be
for 500 years and waking up to all this.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you're 2,500 years old, a 500-year-old nap isn't a big deal. Plus, you're not going anywhere. You know, it's not like you don't think you have to be in survival mode.
Right. Yeah, you're not walking to get your next meal.
Exactly. So it's just interesting, you know, like what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I actually, you know, I have to say, you know, being in the 2-year medical fellowship that you guys are providing actually has been a really positive impact on me.
That's good.
Well, because I've been in medicine for 30 years, but strictly alternatively. I mean, I have dabbled in, you know, done internships, you know, in the hospital and stuff like that, but early on realized like that was just not for me at all. But in the fellowship, I'm really appreciative, like how many people, I mean, obviously I know that a lot of the people who are teaching your classes are older, right? And so they've carried a lot of this information through thick and thin. And sometimes it's been brutal. I'm sure it was brutal on them. Being able to practice what they wanted to practice, you know. They've done us like a huge service. But it's inspiring to see that actually people in the medical field are actually interested. And that's inspiring to me that, you know, that there is change and change is happening. And, you know, if they start to learn something now, you know, it's the seed that's being planted, and, you know, it'll change it'll change everything about them. And I was thinking about, you know, not to in one of my evaluations, I talked about that, about it said, you know, what other classes would you like to see here at ARM? And I was thinking, you know, it'd be so great to have people come in and, you know, teach plant communication, you know, or teach how to make household really good, so people don't have to buy it, but you can make your own household cleaning blends. Because a lot of the times, you know, it's the environment that is causing a lot of the problems. I go to people's homes and I look at their homes, and they're, you know, their 3 kids have asthma and allergies, and I go into their house and I look in their home, and there's all these plants with soil and mold and fungus and carpet and pets everywhere. And I'm like, well, this is your problem, right? Your environment is the problem. And it has to be cleaned up. But a lot of people don't know how to do that. And I think in the future, it's going to be very important for medical doctors to be able to say, here's a ditto sheet, something to think about. These are, you know, homemade cleaners that you can make to clean your house, and they're, you know, they'll keep bugs away, and they're super healthy for you, and they'll build the immune system of your house, which will build the immune system of people. And about making, you know, hair products, and like Mary Bove was talking about making creams and lotions, you know, to put on the babies instead of, you know, the toxic ones that are in the public. But I think that that's a huge component, is the environment, and getting people weaned off of these chemicals that they are using in their environment. Anyway, just not telling you guys how to run it, but I'm just telling you, like, I think, you know, helping my clients with making cleaners and products that they can use, you can start to see, a change in their health considerably.
Yeah, totally. Totally. We definitely appreciate the feedback and try to implement things to, make things more worthwhile for patients and for doctors and stuff. And, earlier you were speaking about, treating your dog with herbal medicine and whatnot. Made me think of years ago, my dog was staying with my great aunt, and my great aunt at the time was senile, and so she was talking. She'd repeat, after Tara passes, about, every 5 minutes or so, she'd start talking about my dog and how my dog was likely to die fairly soon because she was having difficulty walking and had a lot of pain in her hips and stuff. And so I just laid my hands on her, and animals can be very responsive to, hands-on therapies and homeopathy and that sort of thing. So I only had my hands on her maybe about 10 seconds or so, and then she just indicated to me that was enough, so I stopped. And then the next day I gave her another treatment, and maybe it lasted like 20 or 30 seconds. And then each day the treatment got a little bit longer. And then on the fourth day, I noticed that her tongue kind of went into convulsions. So instead of the normal pant, the tongue was like a little more spastic and moving all over the place. And then the next day, I kind of thought to her that I would like to do both of her hips. So she kind of got a telepathic message somehow to do that. So I was treating both of her hips at that point. And after that, she came over to be petted, and I sensed that was like, to thank me and whatnot. And then the next morning, we opened the door, and she walked down the steps, no problem, and opened the car door, and she jumped up and got in the back seat without a problem. And I visited my great aunt a few months later, and there was no talk about after Tara passes away. So, yeah, animals can be really responsive to that kind of therapy as well.
Yeah, no, animals are super responsive. I work on animals too a lot. I studied with the guy who developed animal chiropractic, actually.
Oh,
and
cool.
Yeah, I learned how to do horses. And then now I do everything, and I've adapted my whole osteopathic practice to animals and acupuncture. I do everything I do on people, I do on animals. But you can help animals from, the scariest animal I've worked on was a sheep, a 350-pound sheep that ram that was not friendly. He was on a farm to do a job, and he hurt his shoulder, and they were going to put him down. I was actually interning on this farm, and I said, would you guys let me pop him back in? They're like, what? I said, yeah, he probably just needs an adjustment. They were like, okay. So, and with sheep, you can roll them up on their butt with their legs up off the ground, and they'll teddy bear, and they'll be super calm, and you can like trim their toenails because they're dangerous, especially the larger ones if you're trying to handle them.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we sat him up. They had two guys that had to come in and kind of wrestle him and get him down and then lift him up. And then they held him up there, and then we had a plan. So we're all in this pen because he would kill us, he doesn't mean to, but we're separating him from his harem, his Chiquita bananas and his babies. Like, you never separate a ram from his babies. He gets mad. So anyway, so he's in there, and then our goal was the two guys and me, they're like, okay, we're gonna lean him over on the good side. You come in, grab his arm or shoulder and pop it, and then we're gonna go running out the gate as fast as possible. So we had this plan. So they drop him, I run in, I grab his shoulder and his leg, I snap it. It was so loud, he even turned around and looked at me like in shock. And then we went running out the gate, and like within 2 days he was totally back. And they would have shot him on the farm, because they can't have him suffering. And then they would have to get a ram, because that's how, things are done. And, I've worked on horses where old cowboys who they know everything about their horse. They know everything about horses. And then I get a call to go out and look at a horse that's, had some major, major traumas, going cuckoo-doo, giving people the crazy eye, a couple hoofs in the back and the foot and the leg. And then you go out there and you realize, the horse is out. Their C1 or their C2 is out. And then they also have had some kind of major trauma, and then you get in there and you have to work with them. And I've used essential oils and all kinds of different things and tinctures in their water to like get them to calm down a little bit. Maybe give them a substantial amount of oats, to calm them down. And then get in there and then pop it back in, like, because I grab onto their head and everything and put the head on my shoulder, and I have to really, get in there and whack them. And then you can go and start checking the other stuff and seeing the other response spots and start calming those down. But it's unbelievable, like how much trauma. I think it's like we don't really understand when we're looking at animals, like, how much trauma that they're in. And because they don't have a language to go, you know what, my shoulder has been killing me for 3 years, and this turd muffin keeps throwing a saddle on it, keeps, hiking on it from the same side. And I've helped people, like try to not, get up on the horse on the same side, change sides. This is just a lot of stress and work. And a lot of people don't feed horses right. I mean, they feed them a lot too much dried alfalfa, which has noxious weeds in it that causes liver damage. And then you start to see that their meridians, in that liver area, and the vertebrae, they just separate and drop, and then you have these back ends that are dragging.
What and should they be feeding them?
Pasture. Pasture that has a lot of, really good grasses in it. For example, a horse, all animals need essential fatty acids. And if you have grass, you're going to have like all kinds of essential fatty acid plants, and you're going to have antimicrobial plants. You're going to have antibacterial plants. And, they're eating that purslane that's in there that is unbelievable, and 3, 6, 9 essential fatty acids. So they're going to be eating all this stuff in the grass. If you're just giving them alfalfa, dried alfalfa, they're not getting that. And then they've got these noxious weeds that are dried, but they're still eating these poisonous plants, where in the pasture they would navigate around it. And here in the desert, it is hard to actually have a pasture. You have to really work at it. But you can also buy barley and different types of greens that can come, like, how wheatgrass grows and we trim it and we make a juice out of it. They have that for horses, where you can put micronutrient, sprouts like barley and stuff in a tray, water it, and then you can just put the tray outside and they can munch on that. Kind of helps to substitute some wet grasses into their diet.
Nice.
But it's like us, the more we get away from eating from nature, and the way we drag animals away from eating from nature, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's probably our biggest problem that we're facing, is not getting, lettuce, loses all of its nutritional value in 3 days after it's picked. And most of the lettuce that we get in the grocery stores, even organic, is like a week old, because it's it's a hardier variety, so it looks better for long term. And we're also losing a lot of the big thing we're losing is like the vitamin B12, which is bacteria that grows on the plant. Because once they pick it, they wash it and wash it and wash it and wash it. And so there's no microbes left, which are super important for the, the microbial mass that we need in our guts. And also the lack of B12, because we're not actually, eating it from the ground, the way that it's grown and the way that it is, and we overwash it.
True.
So I always think, like, I tell people, like, grow some sprouts in your window, something, grow something and eat it. Anything.
That'd be nutritious.
You got your one kale plant in the backyard, great. Let them grow big and eat one huge leaf a day. Just go out there and munch away.
Great. That'd be good.
Yeah. So we have about 6 minutes. So is there anything else that you want to add about your life? Or do you sometimes see people by Zoom? Do you
Yeah.
have Zoom patients that you see long distance?
Yeah, I can see patients long distance. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So I'll just tell people what your website again is DRDAA, whoops, sorry, DRDARROWHAND.com.
Yep.
So that way they can kind of look it up and see what's going on and all of that. So anything else that you'd like to add? So you want to talk about like what you think is going on? You want to add some stuff about, I know talking about COVID or anything like that and going out onto the branch, you know, for any of us is interesting. A lot of us try to just stay away from those topics, but is there anything that you would like to say about it?
Well, I think COVID is, still with us, though they're loosening the restrictions. One thing that I found was really unfortunate is that the FDA and whatnot was, coming after practitioners that would advertise, certain things, vitamin D or some other supplement or something like that, to say that it treats or prevents something. And they would try to shut that down. And, even like the, various medias would come out against, people taking zinc, preventatively. And, it's true that, with the way things are structured in the United States, that that natural supplements don't prevent or treat anything. And that's why you'll see on the label that it doesn't, there's no statements about it, and you can't treat something, it doesn't treat anything, doesn't prevent anything. But I would think that it's good to encourage people to take things that are have been good for viruses in the past, whether it's good for COVID or not, may or may not be, but like vitamin D is something that's very beneficial, generally speaking, to help to boost the body's immune system. And zinc is often, you could get like a zinc lozenge or something like that. That's really beneficial. One study that I looked up talked about, in Japan, they would gargle with different herbal plants that have antimicrobial products. So, might be green tea or licorice. So, with the listeners out there, they could get any tea that they have that has, anything that's aromatic, meaning that it has like an aroma to it, will often have antimicrobial properties to it. And so you can just gargle with it. And the concept there is that in order for the virus to get into your lungs, it first has to go through your mouth or your nose and through your throat. And so if you're using if you take this, green tea or licorice or something that's aromatic and you're gargling with that, then it's going to basically be washing that virus off of your throat so that it doesn't get into your lungs. You can either spit it out or, you can swallow it or whatever. And they found that when children would gargle with, a green tea or licorice or whatever, that the chances of them getting, the flu or some other virus was about 50%. So just doing that, something that's really good. Vitamin A, vitamin D and K, vitamin C, they're all beneficial. Selenium is a mineral that, is also good. You want to get at least 200 micrograms. It's something that you don't want to get too much of, because if you get like 1,000 or more, then it may have toxic properties. So you don't want to go too high on the selenium. And on the zinc also, you don't want to go too high. But, if you go like 30 milligrams or something like that, that should probably be a good dose. And then, on the fellowship on Tuesday night, we talked, a doctor talked about using essential oils. So one thing that a lot of patients have is they'll have a loss of smell or taste. And so my sense is that it may be a zinc deficiency that resulted in that, because oftentimes if you have a low zinc in your body, that you could taste you could take a sample of zinc, and it should have a metallic taste. But if it just tastes like water, it's an indication that your zinc levels are low.
Oh wow! So I'm
yeah.
just letting you know that we're ending the show, and so
a minute left or so.
Yeah,
so
we're gonna have music coming in.
Different natural therapies is there's a lot that you can do to kind of help boost up your body, and so I just recommend checking it out and seeing different things that you can take, and a lot of herbal plants can be beneficial for you to do that. And one lady had said that a mixture of doing essential oils will help to bring back your sense of smell by just sampling them every day or whatever. And so as long as you're not causing any pain and whatnot, the natural therapies can be beneficial.
Yeah, there's more plants than there is pharmaceutical medicines out there.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Darrow Hand, thank you so much for coming on, and really appreciate it. And so, yep. So anyway, you can go to revolutionradiofreedomslips.com and check out what you can do for donations, and just keep us going, because we're moving forward. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day. See you next week.
Okay.